Good evening and welcome to the Township of Woolwich Committee of the Whole meeting on August the 8th, 2022. We are now live on YouTube. I will now do a roll call of council. I, Councillor Shantz, am present and chairing this meeting. Mayor Shantz.
I'm here.
Councillor Martin.
Present.
Councillor McMillan.
Present.
Councillors Merlihan and Redekop were unable to attend the meeting tonight and send their regrets. The council reconvenes an open session. Is there a mover and a seconder? Mayor Shantz and Councillor Martin, all in favor? And that is carried. I'll now read our land acknowledgement. The land on which we meet has been here from time immemorial. People have inhabited Southern Ontario for about 10,000 years, and we acknowledge the neutral peoples, also called Attawandaron, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee, people who lived here when settlers arrived and who share this land with us. May we together learn to care for and respect each other, our flora and fauna, and the land we inhabit together. Do any council members have any declaration of pecuniary interests? Not seeing any. We have no public meeting, no presentations, and so we'll start with the delegations. The region's recommended land needs assessment. First, we'll hear from Director of Development, Deanne Fries. Ms. Fries, please begin your overview when you are ready.
Sorry. So the region has completed their land needs assessment with Regional Council endorsement in principle of a growth approach. This growth approach supports the principles of higher intensification rate and minimizes the loss of agricultural land. The growth approach includes community and employment land in Elmira, St. Jacobs, and Breslau, all to be included in the urban area, and it can be seen on attachment 1 of the report. 150 hectares of community area have been added to the urban area and 456 hectares of employment area with an intensification rate of 61% as well. The report also includes staff's comments in response to the region official plan policies that are included in attachment 2. And we also have Rod Regrier here from the region who is able to answer any specific questions about the ROC review as well.
Thank you, Ms. Fries. And I'd also like to note that Kushla Matthews from the region is also here. Council, do we have any questions? Mayor Shantz.
Thank you. This is just a question to ensure that people understand. So the targets are residents and jobs per hectare. So just to be clear, we can't make residential density and ignore jobs, right? So just an explanation of how jobs per hectare play into the residential piece.
So the lands that are to be included in the urban area include community area, which is things like residential and commercial, and employment, which would be the primary industrial jobs. But there could be also additional jobs in the community land in the form of commercial type of development. And I can let Rod respond as well if there's additional that you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, thank you. So you're correct. Deanne is correct in this. For community-oriented and large office employment, the calculations are fit into that category of persons or jobs per hectare. In the employment areas, the regional employment areas, which we've also designated as is required by the province for this particular amendment. The identified density of employment in employment areas is 35 jobs per hectare. And that's, again, averaged over the entire region. So the individual, we know that certain types of industrial employment are lower density and certain types of are somewhat higher density. So we expect fluctuation to happen on a more localized basis, but on average across the region, we're looking at 35 persons and jobs per hectare for traditional industrial areas. But we'll see much higher employment in transit-oriented office developments in our downtowns and uptowns, and to some extent in our community areas where you would expect to see, for example, retail employment, professional services type employment, and that sort of thing.
Sorry, my mic wasn't on. Go ahead, Councillor McMillan.
I saw your lips move, but you're too small on my screen to read them. Thank you, Chair Shantz, through you. Mr. Regier, you sent us a communication that got to us today. I appreciate all the work that went into that. Just for the benefit of people who might not have had a chance to see that, can you please explain to me what the impact of the countryside line on Woolwich will be with the regional draft plan here?
Yeah, through Chair Shantz. Yeah, the countryside line is not playing into really any of the land allocations in the Township of Woolwich. All of the allocations are inside of the countryside line. There's quite considerable amount of land around in the countryside line around Elmira, for example, St. Jacobs, and in Breslau, where the bulk of the growth is taking place. So we're seeing that the countryside line, which establishes in certain areas the permanent boundary of the developed area of the region, is not infringed in any way by the proposals that are being put forward here.
Thank you.
Council, any other questions? Seeing none. Councillor Merlehan did send in some comments, so I'm just going to read what he wrote. I am generally supportive of the staff recommendations proposed and new lower limit of additional land that are strategic in nature for Elmira, Breslau, and St. Jacobs. I also support the comments clarifications that staff suggest in the wording of the ROP in regards to the township. So that is from Councillor Merlehan, I should say. I do have a couple of questions, and I wonder if staff could put up the map that I sent them. And while we're working on that apparently. This is an area that's on Bloomingdale Road and Daniel Street. And we've been talking about this area. I have been talking about this area probably from the first time I was on council 6 or 7 years ago. And I'm wondering, there's two spots here. The spots in red are the two properties that we're talking about, and the blue is the actual township boundary. And to me, these areas, I know they're not in a settlement area, and I think that's what the reason is. But these lands are right there where there's services, sewer and water. Transit comes right out of Daniel and Bloomingdale Road. School bus goes right down Daniel. But yet we're not allowed to develop these lands. And if you look at that, there could be a number of houses there. And to me, it would be an ideal property for low-income housing because of all the services there. So I don't know whether Mr. Regier or Ms. Fries could comment on that as to how we can develop these lands in the future.
I understand that there are some significant issues that the township is concerned about. I'm not familiar with all of the details there. I would maybe ask Ms. Fries to respond with a little bit more detail. And on our team, perhaps Kushla might be able to respond if she's available.
Yeah, through or to you, Mr. Chair. So those properties in Bloomingdale, they could be considered at a later point in time. They were not considered priority development locations at this time. The region is also doing additional work for those smaller rural settlement areas as well in their second phase of their ROC review. So there may be a possibility to look at other lands at that time, but it would be minor rounding out of those rural settlement areas.
Yeah, I guess my only comment is that we're talking about not wanting to expand out into the agriculture area, and yet we have a couple of prime spots that could easily be developed, and we're not taking advantage of that. So I would ask that you look at that in the future, in the near future, if possible. That would be my only comment. Any other comments from council or questions? Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I had a question about the 15-minute communities. Is that basically Breslau that we're talking about, that people can walk to amenities within 15 minutes, or is that region-wide?
Well, through you, Chair Shantz, the concept of the 15-minute community is something that we think is really important to develop in the fullness of time over the planning period through all of our communities across the region, rural and urban. You can picture, for example, a neighborhood in a city in which it's possible to walk or cycle within 15 minutes to basically all the services that one requires, including transit to other employment areas. And that concept is actually available already in a town like Elmira, for example, where you can basically walk across town to employment, or cycle across town to employment, and pick up your groceries on your way home, that sort of thing. So that concept of a very compact, serviceable community where it's convenient for people to move around is a design idea that we think is really important to help minimize these single occupancy vehicle trips that people now make in order to get to basic services like groceries or the dentist or something like that. So we see it applying right across the region, and as I was saying, over the course of the planning period. Right now, it's not available in many areas, and I would say a place like Breslau is a perfect example of that, where right now, if you live in Breslau, it's very difficult to get within 15 minutes as a pedestrian or a cyclist to the services that you need, all of the services that you need. So we think that as we're planning out our new communities, and as we're planning the evolution of our existing neighborhoods, this is a set of key design ideas that are important to take into consideration.
Go ahead, Ms. Rees.
Thanks, Rod. I just wanted to add to that as well that the township did include in the township response to the regional policies that there could be some consideration for township modification of the 15-minute communities, given the constraints that we have. We have some smaller areas. We have some areas that are not yet 15-minute communities, but in general, the principle we support. It's just that there could be something that's a little bit more geared to those smaller areas where they might not always be able to reach that 15-minute goal. And that's included in attachment 2 of the report.
Councillor McMillan.
Yeah, not a question, just a comment with regards to the 15-minute walk. I live in downtown Elmira. I actually own a property that's pretty close to downtown Kitchener as well. And the walking score for my Elmira property is higher than the walking score for the Kitchener property. So I think there's a belief that you can't have walkable communities, and certainly in some of our smaller settlements, it's going to be more difficult. But I like the idea of having that goal so that where it is possible or where it already exists, we do what we can to maintain it and build it in some of our rural communities, because it does exist in some places out here.
Thank you. Mayor Shantz.
Thank you. Just one other question, and it's Conestoga Meats is really an agricultural industry. What's the benefit of moving it into the urban area?
That's a great question through you, Chair Shantz, to Mayor Shantz. That's a great question. I think it's important because if you think about the Menno Street, the proposed development of an employment area that's anchored by Menno Street, Conestoga Meats forms a portion of that. It's a heavy industrial use, so it's definitely it would definitely benefit from municipal services. It would benefit from, for example, transit services, from water and wastewater services. It's already got access to community water. So although it's currently isolated, relatively isolated in its location, it makes a lot of sense to build an employment area around it that has complementary land uses and that can tap into and utilize, make better use of the type of infrastructure which would also serve Conestoga Meats. So from the point of view of land allocation, it's simply recognizing the fact that we do have a heavy industrial user here. It is obviously an agricultural product processing facility, but that's similar to other meat processing facilities in an urban context, like Schneider's and historically in Kitchener, or Peller's Meats in Waterloo and so on. So you where you see these large industrial employers utilizing significant amounts of public community municipal services, it's important to bring them in and also build a land use cluster around them that supports their long-term stability and evolution.
I also see that Ryan is here from the region. Do you have something to add to that, Ryan? And welcome, by the way.
Thank you. Rod touched on it. It's largely a servicing ability. If we add the lands into the urbanized area, there's a capacity to add wastewater servicing to the Conestoga Meats property.
Yep. Thank you.
Any other questions before we move on to the delegation? Okay, before we hear from the delegates this evening, please be advised of the following instructions. Please leave your video and microphone off until you are called on to speak. Each speaker has a maximum of 7 minutes unless counsel or the clerk has set a different time. There will be a timer on the screen and you will be hearing a warning when you have the 1 minute and when your time is up. Once you have finished, please turn your microphone and camera off again. You may listen in to the rest of the meeting or leave when you want. Council will hear from all speakers and ask questions of clarification. Council discussion and debate will start when all speakers on the topic have finished. First up is registered delegate Kunli Oluworu, and I apologize if I didn't pronounce your name properly. Mr. Oluworu, please turn your microphone and video on and begin when you are ready.
Thank you very much. Hello, can you hear me, please?
Yes.
All righty. Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my slide with you. And I do want to thank you, Mayor, and all members of council for giving me the chance to come again today to speak about the reversal of the essentially a response to the reversal of the designation we had as of the 6th of June. So we have our land on 1700 Cramp Road, Breslau, and the intent is actually to try and foster a collaboration between the region and township so that there can be a unity in delivering the Breslau GO station related to the relationship we already have with Metrolinx. We started this process way back in 2017, and our land here that you can see right in front of us is the Thomasfield designation for employment. On the left-hand side is the Hopewell Creek, and right behind us are the new designations. So we're essentially surrounded. So we've been working with Metrolinx, and all Metrolinx has been working with the region is just to add our land, which is only 10.84 hectares of land, to deliver the Breslau GO station based on all the plans that we've been having. I won't go through the entire slide here, but at the very bottom there, we actually have it that Thomasfield has acknowledged through the consultant several times that the model for the TOD is not going to work for them. So they opted out. So Metrolinx has been building agreements and different stages of progress with the market-driven approach to deliver the Breslau GO station. That is how we became strong, and we were able to bring in all the consultants who's been working with us. Now, the moment we had the announcement on the 6th, I did go over to the whole team and Metrolinx, Infrastructure Ontario, MMAH, and all the other people who are involved in trying to make sure that this designation does work. The employment status we had, it's an uphill battle to get the whole thing done if there was no community zoning, but we were willing to work with that. So the whole team that heard the whole good news, it was a reversal we heard almost 2 weeks after that they had cut down on the amount of the designation that Woolwich would have. So that kind of put a lot of strain on the entire team and a lot of surprise that we are doing a project that actually benefits the community. It is a lot of work, it's a lot of investment, it's a lot of effort from all the sides that are involved. Metrolinx made it really clear some time ago when we had all the meetings that they will not deliver the GO station, that they're going with the market-driven approach. This is the same model that is working in 10 or 11 new GO stations, all the way from Toronto, all the way down this way. It seems like as if Waterloo just seems to see it differently. And I don't believe that should be the angle that we should be coming from. We should be collaborating because the economic recovery, the transit need for this region, everything is so essential. This is the basic proposal that we have with our legal team put together for Metrolinx, and Metrolinx accepted this, and they actually double accepted it when there were modifications made to make it more palatable so that every stakeholder can benefit from it. And I think they discussed it several times with the regional planning department. So this is what the contents are. I won't be able to read them all because of time. And if I go to the next slide here, we've made a lot of effort to work with the regional planning, but every time we're met with obstacles, our consultants, our planners, the designers, the marketing people, they've made a lot of efforts since 2018. And the response we got at one point, which tells us in one of the points here, I think it's the third point you can see there, that the regional staff said that, well, the GO station won't be built for another 10 or more years. I don't believe that we can wait that kind of time based on the economic condition of our country, and especially of our region. We believe that transit is so necessary that we cannot bypass these priorities some of the things we thought about was the land designation changes. Okay, we looked at some lands that were changed, and we noticed from what the mayor had said that the importance or priority of what was placed on those land. Do we have priority on 10.84 acres that's going to benefit the whole region to have no cost to the taxpayers to build a GO station? It's going to effectively serve Waterloo region residents, community, and foster collaboration with all stakeholders. It's going to address economic recovery and tools post the pandemic. And it's going to cut down on traffic congestion to and from Toronto. All these benefits are there for the region. And that is our purpose as an organization, that what can we give that's going to help our own community be built better? Now, this is where my comments, I will probably end this presentation here, that we have, Metrolink has made the policy pretty clear that they're not going to be building any GO station. If the policy is working in over 10 or 11 different GO stations currently, that was how they brought us in. We didn't go solicit them. They came to us since 2017, and we have been working on different aspects on how to make this model work around here. The notion that we can build up and high so that model will not work here does not fit. You know why? Because on the same land, we have properties, we have designation for condominiums. Okay, we have condominiums built for 4 floors. You don't build up, you build out. And the amount of what you can make to make the TOD work can work up to about 4 floors. I'm just talking about the property type. But the aspect that I was going to stop on is that the region can look at this. You can make the informed decisions with Metrolinx. We're willing to work with whatever is needed to make sure that we're able to deliver on this need for the region. I'll take any questions, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Counsel. Do you have any questions? And maybe if I could get you to stop sharing your screen so we can see everyone. Thank you. Questions from Council? Okay, not seeing any. Thank you, Mr. Oluwoju.
Oluwojure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Sorry.
you very much, Councilor.
Okay, have a good evening. I will now ask the clerk if there are any unregistered delegations in the meeting for this report.
Thank you, Chair Shantz. There are no, sorry about that. My video isn't coming on here. Thank you, Mayor Shantz. There are no unregistered delegations in the meeting tonight.
Thank you, Clerk Smith. As there are no other delegations, Council will now discuss and debate. Council, is there any further discussion or questions for staff? Mayor Shantz?
I'm wondering if Mr. Regier would have anything to add based on Mr. Oluwojure's presentation.
Through you, Chair Shantz, I don't have anything really to add to that. I don't. Although there had been a request for inclusion in the urban area, the property is now outside of the urban area, and there were other higher priority sites for inclusion of new employment areas in the township. The bulk of those have been in the south end of Woolwich, in the area of Meadow Street and along Fountain Street. And so it's those are higher priority areas as identified by our model, primarily because they're able to be serviced in the fullness of time. And here we're talking about the very long term through the Victoria, or not the Victoria Street pumping station, but the sanitary trunk currently being constructed in North Cambridge.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. There's a recommendation in the report. Would anybody like to move that? Mayor Shantz, and seconded by Councillor McMillan. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you, Mr. Regier, for joining us. Have a good evening. Okay, before we pass, unfinished business, we have none. Before we pass a motion to approve and receive the consent agenda as a whole, does anyone wish to remove any items for further discussion? Mayor Shantz?
Thank you. I had just a question on 10.1.1, the St. Jacobs Healthy Valley, what is it called? Trail Pavilion.
Yes.
The question is, we've also discussed creating a washroom in that general area as well. Has there been thought given to with the placement of this pavilion, would that be the best placement if we were also to put a washroom there? It would seem to make sense to me to have them together.
Jenna's okay. Jenna is with us. Welcome, Jenna.
Good evening, through you, Councillor Shantz, to Mayor. Oops. I don't know. Sorry, through you, Councillor Shantz, to Mayor Shantz. The topic has been brought up, but at this time, it is not the most suitable location for a public washroom facility.
So then my question would be, is there a place that would fit for both criteria? Like, do we need to have two different facilities, or is there a better placement for the pavilion where there could be a washroom added down the road?
Sorry, I can jump in there, Jenna. I was having some computer issues, so I had to log off for a second there.
Okay.
Through you, Councillor Shantz, to Mayor Shantz. The location, land in St. Jacobs that the township owns is very limited. And one of the spaces that we've identified and will bring forward as a part of 2023 capital budget deliberations is the southwest corner of Water Street. So just across the road from the fire station, there is a parking lot there, a small parking lot that the township owns. So that is a location that could be serviced by sanitary water, hydro, and does kind of make the most sense at this point in time. That won't be something that we're bringing forward for next year, but I believe I've got it slated for the year after at this point in time. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And so since we are talking about that, and we're not going to move the other ones, Councillor Merlihan also had some comments on that. And just let me get my sheet here. Okay, his comments, Councillor Merlihan. I don't understand the design of the pavilion. This looks like nothing else in the township or even St. Jacobs. This appears to be a more modern approach, while St. Jacobs is a community that has a yesteryear appeal. Does this design reflect and serve the residents here, or more to appeal to tourists? And the second question is, what is the purpose, and does the design accommodate that? So I don't know, Mr. Vanderhoff, if you could, or maybe Jenna, Ms. Morris, if either one of you could respond to those two questions.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Shantz, through you. I can add some comments, and if Thomas has anything to add, he's welcome to jump in. But really, the picture that was presented as part of the idea for the pavilion is just for inspiration. So as part of the RFP, we are selecting or the applicants are submitting a design that will be selected by the evaluation team. And the design will really take all the feedback through our through our community consultation before landing on it. So it really will reflect what the community wants at the end of the day. The one that was pictured though is really just for inspiration.
Okay, thank you. I assume that will be the answers that Councillor Merlehan is looking for. Any other items that we want to bring out of the consent items before we vote on them? I'm not seeing any, so do I have somebody that would like to move that? Councillor McMillan, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Martin. And all those in favor? And that is passed. Thank you. We're going to go to the quarterly report now. Director of Finance, Richard Petrick, is with us to provide council with an overview of his report. Welcome, Mr. Petrick.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as council can see through the report, at the end of the second quarter, we spent about 5.7 million of the 11.8 million of our net levy budget. That gives us a positive operating variance of about 1.49%. So if we kind of look at that where we were from the first quarter and even to where we were at this time last year, we're actually ahead of it. So we're actually in a better surplus position. There are a couple of things to really talk about from the operating side that really kind of reflecting or kind of influencing this. One, council can remember at the beginning of the year, we were still very much in a bit of a lockdown situation, especially with our recreational facilities. And since then, we've been open and they've actually have kept their own and have done a great job rebounding. I think that is both from a revenue perspective as well as still continuing to do cost containment in that area. I would have to say that as part of that, and council may recall through our 2022 budget discussions that we were taking in some of the revenue we received from the COVID relief fund through the province and the feds. We were keeping some of that back and bringing it into the 2022 budget. Also, we actually have a little bit more that we can bring into our 2022 actuals. They're not reflected in here yet, but I think we may start to need that as we go through. I think one of the things to really talk about I think that has a negative impact on where we are right now is with our rent of control. I think through the first quarter, I was saying that we had about 14% remaining. As you can tell with this one, or sorry, it's 2.46% remaining at the end of the first quarter. You know, through the second quarter, we're now in a deficit position about 14%. So we haven't even started the 2022-2023 winter season yet. So I can only say that the deficit in this area is probably going to get worse, but you know, we're going to be trying to make sure that we anticipate any of the overages and even cover the overage that we're currently having. Try to contain that both within the infrastructure services budget and then with our general budget at large. I think the last remaining comment from the operating budget, and you've heard me say this in previous years, as we get into this time of year, we're starting to ramp up some of our programs, specifically within the infrastructure services, from the crack sealing, the surface treatment, the gravel program. It's not really reflected at the end of the second quarter, but they come in really big bulk expenditures, and we'll see that come to fruition when we look at the third quarter report. I'm just going to hop over the water wastewater budget really briefly because I want to touch on a couple of things on that. Because really briefly speaking, from the capital budget side, you know, as council knows, there was a number of RFPs done. There were a number of tenders that have been awarded. We see the construction that's going on specifically in Elmira, lots of activity going on. Not quite reflective in our capital statements as of yet. I think we're starting to see some of those larger invoices coming in now, and we're going to see a much different landscape with our third quarter report. And of course, that will still continue on as we finish off our capital projects in 2022. As I said, just to kind of reflect or kind of circle back onto the water and wastewater budgets, at the end of the second quarter, the wastewater program is in a deficit position about $160,000, and the water program is in a deficit about $291,000. So taking a look at that, for me, it was kind of perplexing as to why we were in that situation. And you can see through the statements that the revenue that we received, so this is the money we take through our billings, we can see that it is in line with our revenue expectations. But we can see that the other systems in the regional billings are kind of tracking about 8 to 10% higher than budget. So we did some preliminary investigation into kind of really what was going on. And so for us, we're just not seeing that that our billings are kind of lining up the way they should. We think we're kind of missing some billings. Whether that's part of the water remote program, I think that's something we're going to have to kind of figure out and kind of see. I don't think it's a residential type of missed billing. I think it's more on the commercial and industrial side. But I think the other thing that we also have to really kind of think about as well is we do have a pretty high construction rate that's going on this year. And of course, we do have water testing that occurs. So there is some water loss that occurs because of that. But right now I can say that we're in the investigation stage to figure out what's going on with those billings and to kind of figure out if we can kind of get some resolution into this year and make sure that, we don't end the year in deficit positions. I think one of the things is to touch on that's not in the report, and I kind of highlight a little bit. It's just with our water remote program. I think we're pretty much to the bulk of the installations. Right now, we're in the process that we're actually doing the software side. So we're doing some of the software installations now. And that's more in our financial system. And then we're going to be going off and actually getting back in with KTI and Census and doing the software that's going to be allowing us to take our own breeds and being able to upload that into the financial program. So at that stage, Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to take any questions that council may have, and we do have other staff on that can answer questions that I may not.
Thank you, Mr. Petrick. Questions from council? Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Through you to Richard. Why does winter control have to be a problem every year? Do we not have a reserve that has a 5-year average in it that we can draw from? And then when we have surplus money at the end of the year, we just top up that reserve.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, we do have a reserve. I think the reserve is only about $20,000. And as you said, when we've had surpluses, we've been able to put money into it. That hasn't happened in a while. So of course, we haven't been able to build up that reserve. And so I think that's something, we'll obviously try to do as we go into the future budgets. But, at this stage of the game, we don't really have a lot to draw upon. I think it's right now we're going to have to look internally. If not, we do have to rely on our operating contingency reserve.
Anyone else? Questions? No, it looks like we're letting you off easy this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So that was just a report that we do not have to do anything with that other than receive it. Next, we have Development Engineering Technologist Lori Fox to provide council with an overview on her report, the proposal award for the servicing capacity study. Welcome, Ms. Fox.
Thank you, Chair Shantz. Madam Mayor and members of council, on behalf of Development Services, I'm pleased to present report DS 27-2022, which is a request for council to award the completion of a servicing capacity study to GM Blue Plan Engineering. This study is an important step needed to complete the township's updated growth management strategy. The servicing data collected and analyzed will also be used to update the township's asset management plan. Working with various township departments and the region of Waterloo, the servicing capacity study aims to collect data on our existing sanitary and water services, assess the capacity of the current systems, and make recommendations for expansions to sanitary and water servicing to meet the demands of the township's future growth. The study is expected to be completed in August of 2023. Once collected and analyzed, sanitary and water servicing data will be entered into an interactive modeling software, which will help staff determine servicing needs for projects and various areas of the township. The request for proposal was entered into the bids and tenders website on May 30th, with responses due back on June 20th. The township received 2 proposals at the closing, one from GM Blue Plan Engineering and the other from MTE Consultants. Staff reviewed the proposals using the township's evaluation model, which awards points based on project understanding, consultant's experience, the project manager and team, and also project costs. Based on this evaluation model, the firm of GM Blue Plan Engineering achieved the highest overall evaluation. The cost for the project was budgeted at $400,000 and GM Blue Plan's bid was $317,822.98. The remaining budget will be brought forward and used for the growth management strategy project, which is expected to begin in 2023. Staff is recommending that RFP 2022-12 for the completion of a servicing capacity study be awarded to GM Blue Plan Engineering. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Any questions from council? Wow, not. Oh, Councillor McMillan.
Yeah, just do we have any experience with GM Blue Plan? Is this a company that we've worked with before that we have a relationship with?
Through the chair to Councillor McMillan. Yes, we do. GM Blue Plan Engineering has been involved with several other projects with the township, and we do have a relationship with them as far as their experience in a project such as this.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Fox? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Fox. There's a recommendation in the report. Is there anyone who'd like to move the recommendation? Mayor Shantz. And seconded by Councillor McMillan. And did you have a question, Mayor Shantz? Is that you look? Oh, okay. Looked like you had a question in mind. So, okay, good enough. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? And that is passed. Thanks, Ms. Fox.
Thank you.
Agricultural enforcement status and direction. Next, we have Manager of Planning, Jeremy Vink, with us to provide council with an overview of his report. Mr. Vink, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Shantz, Chairman Shantz, members of council. So this is just an update. As you are aware, about 2 years ago, we as council and staff brought forward the report and made changes to the on-farm businesses to allow some greater flexibility to address some issues we were having with some of the agricultural businesses. So part of that plan was we're going to go through the township and bring about enforcement to get everybody in line with the new regulations. And so staff began working with those regulations about 2 years ago. We worked with the properties we knew we had some concerns with. As well, staff then moved forward, starting at the top of the township, started working downwards. We had to pick a spot to work from. So we've done about a third of the township in the past 2 years. And it's been a bit of a learning lesson. It's taking a while to get through a number of these properties to deal with the situations. Staff kind of outlined some of the comments there we've been having is even a simple application takes us a bit of time to assess. And that's probably about 15 hours on a simple application, for example, to get from start to finish. Often because here's how the process has been working. We send out a letter to the properties we think might have a business. We ask them to confirm with us, to call us back. If they do have one, we go through the process to legalize them if they're not legal. And that means getting some information from them and then entering into a site plan agreement. And oftentimes we have to call them back to get information from them. So it's not that we're readily getting information a lot of times. We're actually having to keep prodding to get information out and back, as well as we're also having, once we get it, some discussions, they often change the plan. So we're going back and forth, making modifications regularly. So it takes us a while to get a property into compliance. We try to do that within the first 6 months. So from the day we send a letter to the day we kind of hopefully wrap things up, we try for about a 6-month time period. In many cases, we can get that, but there are a number of cases where we don't. So staff is hanging on to those cases and continually following up with them. After about a year to year and a half, if we're just not seeing movement, we actually were turning it over to bylaw enforcement recently. So we have actually moved a few over to bylaw enforcement because we just can't get them to move past a certain point. So we thought we'd bring council up to date on where we're sitting and where things are going, and it's going slower than we had anticipated. And we're also hearing from a few people, I think council has been hearing them too, is they're just a concern of, well, if they're next in line, they got captured in our current process because we're working top down. that they're saying, well, why do I have to stop and fix my business when the guy at the south end of the township, when you're not going to get to him for 5 years, he gets to keep going. So it's not fair, that fairness in that sense. So we thought we'd make council aware. We went through and provided a few options here about how we could proceed or change the situation if council wants us to. So the first one is just continue with the current process, moving forward as we've been doing, slowly, piece by piece. And that's going to take us probably another 6 years to get to the south end of the township. They use the brain on us because we're constantly trying to keep up with these applications and move them through. We could cease the operations altogether and go to that other extreme. Not recommended, just because it's unfair to the people we've already dealt with, and it would allow these businesses to continue to operate illegally. So there'd be liability concerns about safety for these properties, as well as they're not paying them the fair share of development charges and any taxes that they're supposed to be paying, where other businesses are. Another option is to move forward with a consultant to maybe do the planning and do the enforcement side to try to get the properties into compliance from the planning perspective. What might happen is we're not sure, who would take on such a task. We don't even know a company that might even take that on. It would potentially lead to a lot of enforcement issues at once, because if they go through the whole township in, let's say, a year, and they don't see, people don't respond well, then they may have to turn over to our enforcement staff to deal with, which may mean a lot of extra work for them. Regardless, it would mean extra work for building staff, because we'd be dumping all of these onto them within every year, because almost every single one of them needs to go through a building permit process on top of the planning process. Another option is to hire some additional support, so staff such as a contract or co-op students to help move us through the process faster. The very last process we option, number 5, was just saying, well, let's just blanket the entire township, send everybody a letter, have everybody call in and tell us where they're running business at. Basically verify if they're, we trust them as it is, so they'll have to say yes or no, we're running a business. We might ask them a few questions and then try to get through the planning process. Again, we put a lot of pressure on staff in a very short period of time. We obviously couldn't do the entire township at once. We'd still do it in a staggered process, probably every few weeks, just so we wouldn't be overwhelmed, but it would be a potential process to get us through it in about a year. So we did also get our legal opinion from our lawyer just about how to proceed, and he is recommending we continue to proceed to deal with these issues, because there is liability concerns and there's safety and risk concerns with these businesses that are operating out of buildings that don't conform. So there is concerns there that we need to address. So he is recommending we continue with enforcement, but it is up to council's direction as how we proceed. So staff is just looking for some input and thoughts. No solution is easy and no solution is fast. There was some comments from Councilor Merlihan. I guess going to maybe quickly address them. He had some questions about how many businesses would be seen in the top third of the township. I'd probably say one business in every 4 farms, give or take, every 4 or 5 farms. I think that's going to continue through much of the township, that we're going to see that, if not, roughly similar. So we're seeing a fair amount of businesses that we've captured so far, probably in about 50 at this point in time that we've legalized. There's others we're still dealing with to legalize. Even on, like I said, on a simple application, we're probably talking 15 hours, give or take, of time back and forth. And the fees do cover the costs. They're covering our site plan review fees. So that's the intent. So we're trying to cover things through our site plan review process. But as I mentioned, there has been a little bit of pushback here and there. Like I said, some of the biggest concerns, though, we find is not the planning process in the end of the day, although the planning process gets them there. It's the building code compliance, because once they get through the planning process, they think maybe they're through it, and then we tell them they have to go through building code. And the code costs to get the building up to code and to pay development charges is pretty costly for some of these farms. And some of them are resistant to do that. And that's where some of the greater costs are that they're incurring, is going through that process to get their buildings up to code, which obviously is their own costs and covered through. And as mentioned, we get developers because we're getting new development fees, the township gleans and puts into our development charge reserve. So important for us to receive those fees also. I think for most of those comments, that's Councilor Merlihan. Definitely willing to answer any questions from the rest of council and hearing from your thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Vink. Questions from council? Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Sean, through you. I don't, couple of comments inside a question here. I don't love the idea of ceasing the enforcement. I think that we need to continue to work through this. I think that that's only fair for the people who have already gone through the process. And I think that that's, you know, a requirement based on how we got to this situation. I think it's a requirement for us as a township to continue on this process. I'd rather go slower and manage staff's workload than hire people or contract out. I think that, you know, if it takes 6 years is listed here, like even if that got pushed out to manage staff's time, even if it was 10 years, I think that, you know, this has been going on for quite a long time. So it's not like this has been happening for 3 years. To take 10 years to fix it is unreasonable. So I would rather push out the time frame than overburden staff or look to hire other staff. I wonder, we know that, or Mr. Vink, you said that it's about 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 farms that has a business. I wonder if we sent out not a letter to everybody, but if we did, like you had suggested, Mr. Vink, batches that are manageable chunks, letters to everybody and asking for signed affidavits and looking to see what percentage of people voluntarily entered the planning process. Because if we know that it's been through a third, if it's been about 1 in 4 or 1 in 5, and all of a sudden it's 1 in 10 that are saying I have an on-farm business, we know that's probably not consistent with what we've found. But if we are getting 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 farms that are voluntarily entering the program, then maybe we have a reasonable expectation that we are catching most of the on-farm businesses. So I wonder if there's maybe a hybrid between a couple of the different approaches that might manage staff's time a little bit better and also manage, you know, our resources reasonably well as well.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair Shantz, to Councillor McMillan. Is there a modified process potentially to speed that up? We could go a little bit faster that way. That's by sending out a letter and hoping people respond. The next step is just staying on top of them, which is where we find the larger piece of work. So either way, I think we're going to be up at a 6 to, like you say, maybe 6 or more years by the time we actually probably get through most of the township to be workable between staff's workload of other things going on. So it will still be a long process. I'm not going to guarantee it's going to be much shorter than 6 years.
Follow up? Yep.
Yeah, and my suggestion for the hybrid was more managing staff resources rather than speeding up the process. I'm not in a rush to get it done. I just want to be, you know, cognizant of the fact that staff don't have unlimited resources. So it's more about managing staff workload.
Mayor Shantz.
Thank you. Just to follow up on one of Councillor McMillan's questions, or actually your comment on it, Mr. Vink. Excuse me. You said that the bigger problem is going to be staying on top of it. So if this is a problem that's going to be ongoing, even if we were today able to take 6 months and get it all done, the real problem will be staying on top of it going forward. Did I understand what you said correctly?
So when I say staying on top of it, it means they tell us that they have a business. We're
Mr.
often
Vick.
having to.
Sorry to interrupt. Could you turn off your video because you're cutting in and out? I wonder if that would help us.
Sure. So definitely. So even when in terms of support and I'm saying ongoing, a lot of the problems we have is dealing with them from once we've met with them, getting them to come back in with the information and chase it down and to actually get them into the site plan agreement. So that takes a lot of time to follow up with them. So it's that initial follow-up to even get them in the site plan agreement. Once we have them in the site plan agreement, it's easy. They get a site plan agreement, they enter into a certificate of occupancy. They're required to renew that certificate every year. So they're going to come back in and tell us they're still running legally. So that's easier to stay on top of. It's that initial timing to work with them to actually get them to enter that agreement, where sometimes we're actually calling them back every few months to say, where are you and why aren't you back in with this process so we can finalize this.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And one other question, if I might, Chair Shantz. In the report on page 5, you note that the regional official plan will review some changes around on-farm diversified uses and then will implement those changes. Can you comment on what kind of magnitude those might be or what they might look like?
So we don't know what they're going to look like yet. So the region's going to be working on those changes over the next year. That's the next phase after they get through this process of the land budget. We anticipate they're going to look at how they're going to deal with retail. Currently, our on-farm diversified use regulations don't allow retailing really because of the restrictions in the ROP today. So the province's guidelines give flexibility for that. The region's guide policies don't. So we expect some guidance in this new ROP around the retail side and to give some greater flexibility on some retail uses that might be allowed to take place on agricultural properties in addition to industrial uses.
So do you have any sense of the quarter of the farms in the third that we've looked at? How much of that would be considered retail? Do you have that information?
Good question. Good question to Mayor Shantz. I'd say off the top of my head, most we've been dealing with our industrial, probably 99%. I think we've only had to shut down one business, unfortunately, because it was straight retail, pretty much retail, and he couldn't make it go to an industrial side. So only one business so far, probably about 50. That was a retail business that we couldn't legalize.
Okay, so if the region changes the definition, how will that affect what you've done in this third? I'm not quite sure I totally have that straight in my mind.
To be honest, at this point, it won't change much in this initial third. And I think because the north part of the township has mostly been industrial businesses, as we move further south, I think we might have more, we're going to see a variation of businesses. I think we're going to start seeing less industrial, more landscaping, more contractors. We're going to see maybe more wanting to do some sort of retailing uses, I think, potentially, but and especially along the lines of indoor and outdoor storage, I think is going to become a question, especially as we go further south. So I see some changes that some issues that might rise as we move further south.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Shantz, through you. What's the total number of businesses that we think need to go through? If it's 1 in 4, 1 in 5, what's the total number of farms that are outstanding to go through the process still?
Good question again. I haven't run total businesses. I would say we're probably looking close to 150.
150?
Probably 150 to 200 easy.
Okay, so is there a possibility, if we're looking at one of the options where, say we are hiring a consultant to help out, would there be an opportunity for cost recovery with those 150 businesses? If we're looking at $50,000 for a consultant on the lower end, say it's 100,000, if there's 150 farms, what is that, $750 each that it would cost to offset that cost? Like, is there an opportunity to have a fine in our bylaw that is $750 if they have to go through the process and recover the cost? $750 doesn't seem like it would be cost prohibitive to a business that's been operating for a while.
So definitely thank you through Mayor, Councillor Shonts and Councillor Millen. We can't impose a fine on someone under the Planning Act in that way. We can't do that. They actually have to be taken to court under the Planning Act to impose a fine. So the only way we would do it is to actually increase, say, their site plan application fees and then recoup it through that kind of process to say, we're now accumulating hours of work to do this under the planning process, under site plan, we'd have to raise the fees even higher. So right now we're about $2,500. We'd be raising that, let's say, to $3,500. So you'd be upping the site plan application fee to try to recover those costs for those businesses.
Follow up, Chair Shantz? And could that be levied specifically at on-farm businesses that are not currently registered, or would that have to be applied evenly across the board to all businesses in the township?
So that would have to be applied to all agricultural businesses across the township. It is a specific fee for site plans for farm properties. That's their specific fee. And there's a different fee for commercial and industrial properties within the urban area for site plan.
Is that something that staff had considered?
We hadn't considered that at this point in time, no.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? I don't see any. I do want to read a couple of comments from Councillor Merlehan. For those who are tuning in a little bit late, Councillor Redekop and Councillor Merlehan were not able to join us. Councillor Merlehan sent in some questions and some comments. So I'm just going to read this, and I apologize if they've already been covered, but I haven't gone through this and studied it all. So his comments are, I support to continue the enforcement of planning regarding on-farm businesses in the township. I would suggest another approach to consider to gain quicker compliance. An amnesty period of self-reporting and compliance before enforcement, up to and including suspending business that refuse to comply with building code violations. Additionally, fees increased for compliance-related infractions that would borne the complete cost of bringing the business back into regulation. The agricultural community has had 2 years of notice that this was happening. There are little excuses at this point. It is incumbent on the farm properties and all businesses in the township province to comply with zoning and building code, and they are aware of the consequences of not doing so. And I think you answered all the questions other than question 5 that he has here. It says, what is the pushback from the farm community to comply, other than increased fees over the years that they don't want to pay now? He says that I have heard little other type of feedback. So is there other feedback other than just the extra cost of doing business?
Yes, to you, Councillor Chair Shantz. So mostly it is the cost of doing business to upgrade their facilities in the end of the day. So like I said, the planning fees aren't the biggest item. It's the cost to upgrade their buildings, the development charges then that go with that, and then the taxes they now have to pay, which they weren't paying before, which show up on their municipal tax bill. So those are the biggest ones. They just find those costs almost too much sometimes, and that is making them resist. But there has been one other comment we had where somebody, as I mentioned, was concerned that they had to comply now because they happen to be caught in the northern part of the township, and they wanted to be held off and treated like everybody else in the next, like somebody in the south in the township has to wait 6 more years. So they wanted 6 more years to do nothing with anything, continue illegally in the interim, which staff couldn't support. We can't allow something to happen illegally for 6 more years because they didn't want to bring it into compliance. So that was one of the comments raised.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Fries, did you want to comment on that as well?
Yeah, I think Jeremy just mentioned that. One of the bigger issues is because it's taking us a lot of time to get through the township, properties that might be on the that 1/3 that we've started with over by the Elmira side, maybe having to stop their businesses now, whereas the exact same business that may be over by Breslau can continue to operate for the next 6 years or until we get there. So there's some discrepancy there. Perceived whether or not this is a fair approach that we've been doing. We just don't have the staff resources to do the entire township at the same time and give everybody that same notice at the same time that they would have to discontinue the same businesses. And then the other item that does get mentioned to us too is that they can go just across the border to the next township and do that same business, because generally townships operate based on complaints, right? So they don't go and enforce unless there's a complaint that's received. So we've been receiving some feedback from the individuals just that are in that 1/3 that we've started to deal with.
So it's kind of like speeding. If you don't get caught, you're okay. I just wanted to read the last comment that Councillor Merlehan put here, and then that might generate some other discussion. I would support a report to look at options to fast track these compliance options, including setting time limits and process for the future to have properties reassessed for compliance. We have seen what happens when the planning and lack of enforcement go unchecked. So those are Councillor Merlehan's comments. I do have one quick question, and we talked about liability, and you talked about talking to the lawyer about that. And if we know this is going on and we know it's going to take another 10 years, where does that put us in the liability threshold? Or maybe you can't answer that, but it's a question that it comes across my mind.
Yes, to you, Chairman Shantz. So in the conversations with our lawyer, we did talk about, is it fair or unfair to continue in this process of slowly working through the township? And he said at this point it is reasonable because you're making every effort to deal with it. He says it is perfectly reasonable that you're also not going to hit the entire township in 1 year. He said no one would expect that to happen. So it is perfectly legitimate and fair to go through in a sequential order moving around the township. What he doesn't suggest is targeting people or areas, because then you are targeting people. But if you move through in a sequential area and moving through the township over time, you're demonstrating your efforts to address the issues.
Okay, thank you. Any other, Councillor McMillan?
What about I'm sorry if this is ridiculously not possible, but what about a random approach? So instead of doing Elmira, St. Jacobs, Conestoga, and where farms in Breslau know they've got another 6 years, and a farm in Elmira is going to get, nabbed because of the dragnet early. Is there a randomized way where we can select properties throughout the township and it's not, one area, then another area, then another area?
Through you, Chair Shantz, to Councillor McMillan, we could work in a more random pattern. We'd still have to kind of break it out into chunks as to where we're moving, because as I mentioned, it can't be seen as we're targeting one group or one area over another. So it could be more random and sporadic to say we're going to do this area, and then because we've split, let's say the township with the 10 pieces left, we're going to jump to area 10, and then we'll do 2, and then we'll do 8, and then we could do something along those lines so people don't know when they get targeted, when they be next in line. But I don't think they're out there starting this process until they get hit with the letter. They're just aware, and they're just avoiding that. They don't have to deal with it. So.
Or isn't an option having them spit one out and go into that property next?
We could, but it gets complicated.
Okay.
Harder to maintain.
Thank you.
And so going back to Councillor Merlehan's suggestion about just an amnesty period, what would that cost us? I'm assuming he would suggest that we would basically allow them to come in and not charge them. Would that be fairly expensive then as well?
Yeah. It would, in the sense that we'd be if we're trying to waive site plan fees, then we would be losing funds and spending staff time. You know, that would then obviously we'd be losing money, and then that would cost us in some form or fashion. We tried to keep the cost reasonable when we set the cost. So, like I mentioned, they are lower than the industrial commercial rates in town for site plan fees. And we try to make it easy to go through the process. So when we first reach out to people to go through it, we're not hard on them. We give them 6 months to work through this with them. So we try to be reasonable to get them moving and to get into the site plan agreement within 6 months. And then they start working with building staff. So that probably takes another 6 months. So they actually are getting about a year of trying to get things into compliance.
Yes, thank you. And yeah, Councillor Martin and I were at one of those meetings, and yeah, you are very easy on them, I might add, from what I saw at that meeting. So any other comments or questions before I ask the question? And not seeing any. So there's a recommendation in the report. Does anybody like to move it? Councillor McMillan? Oh, sorry, you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, I was a little unclear. I thought they were asking us to choose one of the options.
Oh.
There's 5 options. Is there one that's selected in the recommendation? Sorry if I'm a little mistaken.
Mr. Vink, can you help us out sometime?
Through you, Councillor Chair Sean. So yes, we were recommending that staff explore option 3 to hire a consultant, which that may not be the choice of council or direction of council. So that council could look at any one of those other options as proposed or modification. So it was just a suggestion.
Okay, I guess we should have that discussion then. Councillor McMillan.
Yeah, I would move that. I don't mind hiring a consultant, but I would like to see the cost of it put on the businesses that have to come under compliance. I don't think that this should be the taxpayers, the general taxpayers, and I don't think it's an exorbitant cost. If there's 150 businesses, I don't think $100,000 for those 150 businesses is exorbitant. I think hearing what we've heard, that the larger portion of the expense is in the building code and bringing the buildings up to code, adding another $750 or $1,000 onto the actual fee, I don't think is going to be a limiting factor for those businesses. So I'm okay with adding that cost, but I don't think that the general taxpayer should have to cover that. I would like to see, I'd like to hear from staff about how that could be the cost could be passed on and make it budget neutral, and I would support it at that point.
Okay, thank you. And Mayor Shantz?
I think based on what I've heard, if we send out a letter or however we go about trying to get compliance, and if a business comes back to us right away and we don't have to do a lot of follow-up, I would support the idea of an amnesty in that case, and the other costs to be borne by those people that we need to do follow-ups with. I'm not quite sure how that would look in practical terms, but from a philosophical point of view, that's sort of where I'm leaning.
Thank you. Councillor Martin, did you have a comment or no? Yeah.
Yes, I'll make a comment. I'm not excited about the idea that a business can just pick up here and move across another boundary to another township and carry on. And I've said a number of times from what some of these people have told me is that what they're doing now, they were actually given permission to do by our former building people. So I've always had a bit of a soft spot in my heart for them. I don't know if a lot of them intentionally go out to do something they're not supposed to. I think some of them have did what they thought was okay, and now we're saying it's not. So I have a little problem with that whole thing.
Thank you. Mayor Shantz?
I mean, I guess in terms of definition, if someone is storing boats and trailers, for example, I see that a little different than a manufacturing business. And so, again, I'm not quite sure how that fits into the whole picture, but you know, if you've got an empty implement shed and you're renting space out for people to store their off-season vehicles, that's different than a woodworking or a machine shop.
Thank you. Councillor McMillan.
I agree with Councillor Morton that, you know, coming down on farms that have operated these businesses for a long time with a heavy hand would be, I think, unfair. But I think that the approach that we've taken is with understanding and compassion and a cooperative approach as opposed to a punitive approach. But I do think that the world is changing. We live in different times, and I think that we need, for a plethora of different reasons, we need to have our farms in compliance, our businesses in compliance with laws that exist. So I agree that to come down heavy-handed after a long time would be unfair, but I do think that if we approach it with compassion and understanding and a feeling of cooperation, that I think it's the right thing.
Thank you. Mr. Vink, could you remind me, I thought we did give them the opportunity to come forward and tell us about what they're doing so we could work with them. Has that changed, or am I just dreaming in Technicolor?
So you're not in Technicolor. We work with them right from the start. So everything we do is we try to communicate, we sit down with them and say, where are you going? What's your plan? What's your business? And we work with them through this process on the site plan. They literally start to finish with staff walking them through it, okay? I mean, we don't send them out running for consultants unless they need to conform to zoning, which they don't. If they don't meet zoning, then they have to hire someone. But it was just the true site plan process. We walk them through it start to finish. And work through solutions with them on ways to get their property into compliance.
Yeah, so that to me is the soft approach, and it has worked in some cases, but it doesn't sound like it worked in very many cases. So I think it's time to up our ante, if I may say so. Go ahead.
Just back to that. It has worked in many cases and does work in a lot of cases once we approach them. But there are a number of them that it's not working in for different reasons. Some of them just have a harder time trying to figure out how to comply, and they need additional planning rules. And that's taking much longer than hoped. Some of them are almost 2 years in and they still haven't got their planning applications in, which is challenging because that means we're constantly on top of them. So it just goes slower than we had anticipated, and that's why we're making council aware it's going not as fast as we had hoped it would go. It's going slower, but we're
okay. Thank you. Council, any more comments? We have some suggestions before us. So we've heard one that we should retain a consultant as option number 3 by Councillor McMillan. What do we want to do? Go ahead, Councillor McMillan.
Yeah, Councillor Merlehan in his comments and Mayor Shantz had suggested an amnesty period. I just feel like there's been enough of an amnesty period. I feel like this has been going on for quite a while, and I think that that's been tried and done, and it's time to move forward. And if staff feel like they need the help, I'm happy to give it to them, but I feel like it should come out of the. I think that the cost should be borne by the businesses having to come into compliance, and that cost is not going to be a prohibitive cost in this process. Most of the cost, if we're talking about bringing a building up to code, you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars just to put a shovel in the ground. So I think that adding $750 onto the permit or onto the development charge, I feel like is very, very reasonable if they're talking about, you know, a $50,000 or $100,000 $100,000 project to bring their building into code. Adding $750, I think makes sense as opposed to having the general tax base cover that.
Thank you, Mr. Brenneman.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to council. You know, just to try to summarize and set some context. So as we know, for quite a number of years, you know, Woolwich has, you know, just dealt with these issues previously by complaint or if they were discovered. And, you know, at some point in past history, council decided, okay, no, we need to address these issues. As staff has tried to demonstrate tonight, it's a lot of work. It's a significant amount of work to bring all of these into compliance. I think both Councillor McMillan's suggestion and Councillor Merlehan's suggestions have some merit. However, I'm wondering if council, for the purposes of getting through this, at least for tonight, might want to just direct staff, if there can be a consensus or direction to staff, to come back with some further analysis on the whole issue of making sure that cost recovery is achieved. Because one of the things that I've been sitting here thinking about relative to an amnesty period, technically, if we're going to do an amnesty period, which I believe the intent would be, then people have an amnesty period, so they're not going to be subject to certain normal fees, even though there is still a lot of staff work to do related to processing. That means the general taxpayer also is picking up the cost of that. So if council's intention is still, as it was in the beginning, to make sure these are brought into compliance and things are dealt with, I'll use the terminology that's explained tonight, on a cost recovery basis, perhaps the best that we can achieve tonight is council direct staff, if a majority agrees, to come back with a further report which fine tunes, you know, perhaps an opportunity allows us then, instead of trying to work this out tonight, for myself and the team to talk with Richard about whether, and even Jeff, about whether our fees and charges bylaw can be amended to include an appropriate cost recovery fee, because that's another way in which we can charge fees and charges, is to amend our fees bylaw. You know, that's an option. So that's what I would suggest to council, is that sometimes, you know, we work these things through in an evening, but I think sometimes too, it might be better to direct staff to hear the feedback. And if there is consensus around direction, and again, what I'm suggesting here to be clear is, would the council members in attendance tonight be supportive of directing staff, similar to what Councillor McMillan has mentioned, to come back with a report where there would be a consultant and we come back with a solution around cost recovery? Because again, while I feel the amnesty period has merit, staff has also indicated, you know, we've done a lot of amnesty, or at least working with, and that hasn't exactly sped up the process, it's slowed it down. So if the objective is to gain compliance and to do it as quickly as possible, to also address the criticisms of lack of fairness, where one part of the township can still operate while another perhaps had to decide to shut down, then cost recovery could be the solution. So I'll stop there, but that may be a solution, at least for the purpose of tonight, to, if there can be consensus, to direct staff accordingly.
Thank you, Mr. Brenneman. Discussion on that? Councillor McMillan?
I would move something like that. I think that that's really, I think our best path forward is to give, now that staff have heard what is important to council, to give staff a chance to kind of fine tune things. Me personally, I would rather see cost recovery is more important to me than speed. Frankly, I'm not worried about getting it done fast. If staff, rather than overburdening our existing staff, I don't think if it takes 6 years, I don't think that's unfair. I think Councillor Shantz had mentioned earlier about getting caught speeding. If you're on the 401 and you get caught speeding, is that unfair? Maybe, but you had the choice to not speed. So if it takes a little bit longer, cost recovery is more important to me than expediting the process or overburdening our staff. But I would certainly move that we refer this back to staff to come back to council with a report, with a process that has a consultant, but executes cost recovery for the project.
Okay, other comments on that? Mr. Smith, do you have something that you could make a motion out of that? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have that. I think it sounds like Councillor McMillan moved that. I think the first question would be, is there a second for that motion? And what I had written down was direct staff to come back with a further report with more analysis to make sure cost recovery is achieved with a consultant.
Okay, so that's the motion. Do I have a seconder for that? Mayor Shantz? Further discussion on that before I call the question? Okay, all in favor? 1, 2, 3. Yep, that's a good. Thank you very much. And I guess, Mr. Vink, you're back on track for the active transportation master plan.
Thank you once again, members of council. So earlier this year, we found out that there is funding available from the federal government to do the active transportation master plan. And it was an element that we knew would have to be considered in our upcoming official plan review. So staff applied for the funding to see if we could get it, so it would help offset some of the costs from the tax base. We were successful in getting $50,000 from the federal government to do this plan. We're hoping that that covers most of the costs. If not, we would use monies from the official plan review budget that we have set aside right now of $250,000. And it would be framed, and this plan would then frame and become part of the official plan in the long term. So as I noted, it was going to become part of the official plan, but now we're just hiving it off and separating it because we have this separate funds from the federal government. Because we have the government funding, there is an agreement that we have to enter into. So the agreement is attached. There's your standard agreement about how we spend the money and how we report with the government, and just acknowledging that they're funding part of this. So we were asking if the mayor and the clerk be authorized to enter into this agreement with the federal government so we can use these $50,000 to our benefit and hopefully use this to support our official plan. I'm just going to highlight, there was a question from the Councillor Merlehan just in regards, he want our comment that he didn't want to make clear that this plan wasn't going to be used to supersede anything and push for something we didn't want to see happen. Like I mentioned, it will become part of the official plan. So it's one element in the planning process that we'll use to help support growth in our communities to achieve everything we're looking to achieve in the long term. So going back to the regional official plan, for example, with the 15-minute communities, how would this tie in with that, for example, and how will we bring this all together and use that in our decision making in the future? So if there's any questions, staff is here to answer them.
Thank you, Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Shantz. Through you, is there an opportunity with something like this to partner with other lower tier municipalities or even the region? The region is having a big push to have more active transportation. The 15-minute communities is something that they're pushing for. Is there an opportunity to partner with other townships or the region to develop, I don't know how much different our, excuse me, I don't know how different our active transportation master plan would look compared to Wellesley or Wilmot or North Dumfries, but is there an opportunity to work with them on this?
Through you, Chair Shantz, to Councilor McMillan. The way we structured the agreement with the federal, or the way things are set up with the federal government, we couldn't at this point in time because it's a joint agreement between us and the federal government to utilize the funds. Would there be much benefit in this case? Probably not, because most of our other surrounding municipalities are rural to some extent, other than the cities. But what we have asked in the as part of this master transportation plan is we would look to see how we would connect with these other communities in terms of where their active transportation systems may end at our borders, how we would connect with that where possible. But there's no, I don't think there's any real benefit to us partnering with another municipality at this point. There wouldn't be any real savings or any benefits beyond at all that I could see.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Further to Councillor Merlehan, he had an example here, and I don't know whether it's appropriate for this discussion, but it talks about the region of Waterloo plan for downtown Elmira, suggesting removing parking or all parking or more than half parking to accommodate bike lanes downtown. Is that a thing, or is that a discussion for another time, Mr. Vink?
So yes, definitely to Chair Shantz there, Council, we are working with the region in terms of the future design of Arthur Street with the reconstruction. And you'll hear a bit more about that in our concepts coming at the end of the month with the Core Review design, urban design plans coming at the end of the month, showing you what our proposal is and how we would like it to work and how we've been working and showing that information to the region. And the region has been pushing for some changes downtown that we are at this point not supporting based on the concept that we have coming from our consultants. But yeah, Deanne may have a better comment there because she is running the core area design, so she can give you more information there because she's been stick handling that one and what's going on with the region staff and where we're going with that. So
Okay, Ms. Fries, do you want to comment on that? Thank you.
Yes, so just to follow up on that, it's not that we're not recommending that we need bike lanes in the Elmira core. We're just suggesting that potentially the bike lane could be removed off of Arthur Street and run parallel. It's still under discussion. We've provided some comments to the region, but this is still a work in progress. There's lots of public consultation going along with the Arthur Street reconstruction, and the region is still working on that. The Elmira downtown study will be coming to Council on the 22nd, which shows where that proposed bike lane could be located.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I just didn't want to miss that on behalf of Councillor Merlehan. Okay, we have a recommendation for the report. Do I have somebody to move that? Councillor Martin, seconded by Mayor Shantz. Further discussion on that before we call the... Not seeing any? Okay, all in favor? And that is passed. Thank you, Mr. Vink. We finally got your camera working, and then we had to have you turn it off. So thank you. Consult award for asset management plan update. Next, we have the Director of Infrastructure Services, Jared Poupet, to provide council with an overview of his report. Mr. Poupet, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Shantz, and through you to members of council. This evening, we do have a consultant award report for council's consideration for an asset management plan update that is legislated by the province of Ontario. And this flows from Ontario Regulation 588-17. This is really dipping our proverbial toe into asset management planning, and something that I think is going to be, it's going to form essentially all that we do as a municipality regarding assets, operations, maintenance, levels of service and everything. So really this is the umbrella. OREG 588-17 is set up to be an umbrella really that everything is going to feed into. So I just want to set the stage for council as this is a major undertaking and something that we're embracing from a staff perspective. We see asset management planning is the right way to plan for infrastructure renewals, replacements, rehabilitations, providing service levels to the community for which they serve. And where we are right now is the township does have an asset management plan that was again legislated back in 2014. I can tell you it's an outdated plan. The township does have a asset management policy, which we've appended to this report, and it is outdated as well. So one thing I want everyone to understand is that this is something that will be a living document, something that we'll need to touch throughout everything that we do, not just in infrastructure services, but township-wide, rec and community services, fire department, and the like. So any asset that we own will need to be vetted and sort of flown through this process. And this is really the starting of what the province is looking to implement. So we are required per the legislation to have an asset management plan update that looks at all of our assets by July of 2024. That date was extended. Currently, we are not compliant with the core asset management plan update, which was to be provided and completed at July 1st of 2022. However, staff are diligently working and will have a report before council for its consideration on the August 22nd date. We were aware that we were going to miss that date. There really is no repercussions to about almost a 2-month delay in that. So there's not really a concern from a funding perspective. But ultimately, this is where this all goes, is that you have to spend money and appropriate money at the right time to receive upper government funding in the future. That's likely where this is all going to go. The province is the first province in Canada to implement such significant legislation. And again, I think we need to embrace this with open arms. This is an excellent way to manage your assets. It's no different than your house. You don't just let everything fall apart. You apply the right maintenance dollar at the right time to extend the useful life of your dwelling. It's a very simple process, but it's very involved and very complicated. Ultimately, when you do dive into the details of this, and it involves a multidisciplinary approach to everything. It's not just finance driven. There's a lot of engineering involved in this. Levels of service we need to determine as well. So this is a significant undertaking, and one that we are happy to award or seek council's endorsement of awarding the consulting services for this asset management plan update to GM Blue Plan Engineering Limited at a cost of $256,877.86. We were successful in receiving some grant money through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities regarding the Municipal Asset Management Program grant. We received $39,200, which is about 15% of the total cost of the asset management plan update. And we are seeking council to authorize pre-budget approval in future years in 2023 and 2024 for the difference, essentially is what that is. This will allow then the township to encapsulate everything that's legislated as far as our asset management planning strategies go. And there is a deadline in 2025. We have provisions in the contract with GM Blue Plan to extend this into 2025 if need be. However, the legislation is not perfect, and we suspect that we will be able to have everything needed in 2025 as part of the 2024 update. And the reason I say that is that the 2024 update requires all of our municipal assets to be vetted through the plan. However, the deadline in 2025 requires service levels, their appropriateness, life cycle management, and financial strategies, including funding sources and needs and other assumptions. However, to assume and to plan for all of your assets, you kind of need to do that second piece first. So that is part of this plan with GM Blue Plan Engineering Limited. So the legislation again not perfect, but the intent is excellent as far as we're concerned. So I think what I should also make comment to is that we did receive 3 quotes from Dillon Consulting, GM Blue Plan Engineering Limited, and Public Sector Digest. GM Blue Plan was found to be the successful proponent through our council endorsed process, which is stated in the report. And I think with that, I would be happy to attempt to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you, Mr. Poupé. Any questions? I'm not seeing any from the screen, but I do have some questions from Councillor Merlehan that I'll just read. Does this contract extend all the way to 2024 up to the completion and delivery of the report to the province? And I think you answered that one. Does GM Blue Plan have specific qualifications that the township does not for us to complete the work in-house? Is this just inputting data about infrastructure, or is this beyond our capabilities? I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chairman Shantz, to Councilor Merlehan's question. Yes, GM Blue Plan does have specific qualifications to help the township. This is far bigger than us currently, as we are structured right now. However, the intent of this exercise with GM Blue Plan, and they aptly spoke to this in their response to our request for proposal, was to allow us to be self-sufficient going forward. I think it's important to note that the township has done a wonderful job on our road state of the infrastructure with respect to roads. That is going to feed into this asset management plan. So currently right now we do not have the resourcing to undertake such a tall task. So we are looking to utilize GM Blue Plan as support, but it is our goal to look to continue on in future years internally as much as possible. We may need some outsourcing of specific items, but we look to ultimately be self-sufficient with our asset management plan.
Okay, thank you. And that leads into this next question: was hiring additional staff a consideration? And are there any plans in the future to hire additional staff to manage ongoing asset management duties? So I'll let you answer that one as well.
And again, through you, Chairman Shantz, to Councilor Merlehan's question, there are no considerations for asset management staff in the 2023 budget. We are not contemplating that now. We do not have a time frame for that, but I think it is certainly important to note that we will require staffing in this department. In this group right now, it is housed under infrastructure services. The plan is for the director of infrastructure services to manage this from the infrastructure services side. We are intending to train all of our staff with respect to asset management planning. As I spoke before, we are going to live and breathe this day in and day out. It's not going to be a dry document, it's going to be a living document. And that's something that we are embracing and see the importance of. So I hope that answers that question.
Okay, thank you very much. Council, any other questions before I ask the question? Okay, we have a recommendation here and need a mover and a seconder. Councilor McMillan. Is that your hand, Councilor Martin? Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is passed. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I guess you're on the docket for the next one, Mr. Poupé, the municipal drain number 11.
Yes, you can't get rid of me yet. Thank you. Through you, Chairman Shantz, to members of council. Before council this evening is Woolwich Drain number 11 maintenance assessment schedule. This is really a housekeeping item that was identified earlier. There's been a number of property owner changes since the original report was crafted in 1954. There has been some work done to that, so we are holding monies that we would like to expense to the benefiting properties. And as part of this, we are working on, and I can't give a firm date for when, but staff would like to have a roster system approved by council so that we're not always seeking exemptions to the selection of the drainage engineer. There are only a handful of drainage engineers that work in this field, and we feel that a roster system is probably more appropriate than continually asking council for an exemption. However, we do not have that compiled. Headway Engineering that we are asking council to appoint. Mr. Stephen Brickman used to work for Dietrich Engineering, and he has since gone on his own. So that has now expanded the companies that would be available to perform such work. And we are recommending that council exempt us from the purchasing policy and then appoint Headway Engineering to complete this exercise, which is going to involve public engagement. There will be a meeting, there will be a report again written and returned to council for council's consideration prior to proceeding. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Council, questions? I am not seeing any. So I will ask for a mover and a seconder on that. Councilor Martin and Councilor McMillan. All those in favor? And that is passed. Thank you. And Mr. Poupé.
Thank you, Chairman Shantz. Through you to members of council, we have IS 21-2022 report before you. It is the municipal class environmental assessment for the structure known as 400172 on Greenhouse Road in the Township of Woolwich. We have gone through the environmental assessment process. We have completed the public consultation. The results of that public consultation were overwhelmingly in favor of, albeit there was small turnout. The road doesn't affect a lot of people in this location. However, it's got significant heritage value to the township. It was the first of its kind built in the town in the region of Waterloo, is my understanding, which is a concrete T-beam bridge now over 100 years old. So that's pretty impressive. That it has certainly exceeded its useful life. And the unfortunate part about this structure is that it is far too narrow and is degraded far too much for any kind of rehabilitation to be feasible. So the request of council is to look to endorse alternative 4, which was the replacement option for this structure, so that we can provide a new structure for those who use it, widen it out, make it more palatable for today's vehicles and the horse or in the farming community. And we're seeking council to allow us to post the notice of study completion for the environmental assessment process. And with that, I would be happy. Oh, sorry, I should make a comment as well that there is heritage value to the structure, as I had said, and we are looking to commemorate that through the installation of a plaque, and we will work with the Heritage Committee to determine what would be appropriate and could arrange for some form of ribbon cutting ceremony of some form after construction is complete. But we are aware of that, and I think that may answer or address Mr. Councillor Merlehan's comment as well. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Council. Questions? I'm not seeing any, and you did address Councillor Merlehan's comment about the heritage plaque. I do have one question. The useful life of this bridge is 75 years, and I'm just wondering if Highway 7 gets done in that 75 years, is there going to be an overpass on Greenhouse Road and this bridge will be used a little more often, or do you not have the answer to that?
Through you and to you, Chairman Johnson, no, this will not, this will be separated from Highway 7. It won't see traffic along this stretch of Greenhouse Road.
So, so we won't be able to go down this road, Greenhouse. Okay.
So you will be able to use the road. The road will exist, but it's not going to see commuter traffic likely making its way to Highway 7. I should rephrase that.
Yeah, no,
yeah.
I should have maybe asked the question a little different. Is there going to be an underpass that you could use it to go to that subdivision back there and the Highway 7 service road? Or is that going to be blocked off by Highway 7?
Hopewell Creek Road is still the connecting Greenhouse to Hopewell will remain.
Right.
But I guess I apologize. I was just trying to see if I could pull this up quickly on our mapping.
I should have maybe give you a heads up on that, because so if we're going to redo the bridge and then Highway 7 is going to close the road, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, that is not going to happen. I apologize. No, okay. This will be, the investment is warranted and it will be a good investment for those needing to use that water crossing on Greenhouse Road.
Okay, good enough. That's sorry about the roundabout question.
Pun intended, I'm sure. Anyway.
Thank you very much. We have a recommendation on this. Do I have a mover and a shaker? Councillor McMillan, did your hand go up or no? Thank you. Councillor Martin? Yeah, seconder. Okay, thank you. And all those in favor? And that is passed. Thank you, Mr. Poupet.
Thank you.
Mr. Vanderhoff. Greenhouse reduction pathway feasibility study. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Chair Johnson, through you to council. I am having some internet issues today, so I apologize. If I do, I'll have to log off and come back on real quick, but hopefully that doesn't happen. So as a part of 2022 budget deliberation, staff committed to further researching and returning to council with a plan for implementation of capital projects utilizing the available reserve funding. As a part of this plan, staff are recommending award of a proposal to Simcoe to carry out a greenhouse reduction pathway feasibility study of various major township facilities at an upset limit of $104,000 after the HST rebate. and also looking for council to endorse staff to apply for FCM grant funding through the Building Retrofit Fund. So of note, Simcoe plans to partner with Enviro Stewards as the environmental engineering consultant to complete the feasibility study. And this partnership allows the township to gain the experience of Simcoe with the grant program and also their experience with our facilities, as well as utilizing our local consultant in Enviro Stewards. The FCM Community Building Retrofit Initiative is a grant funding source that is aimed to assist municipalities in optimizing the energy performance and GHG reductions at municipally owned community buildings, and it will help us to achieve our targets as well as a municipality. The feasibility study will provide direction on future climate action initiatives and will allow the township to apply for future grant funding through FCM as well. That's a key point to this. You need to have a completed study in order to apply for future FCM grant funding. And then of note, finally, the study will need to be completed prior to and submitted to FCM prior to receipt or approval and receipt of grant funding. So it needs to be completed first, and then we'll receive the funding afterwards. Again, fairly confident in Simcoe based on past experience with these studies that they have been successful in submitting the studies through FCM. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions council may have.
Thank you. Questions, council? I do not see any questions. There was a comment again from Mr. Merlahan, and I would have to say echo this comment. This will certainly give the municipality better future direction in how best to achieve our committed targets to reduce greenhouse gases in our community. So yeah, I agree with that as well. So so we have a report, recommendation of Councillor McMillan, Autumn Trott, seconder, Mayor Shantz. Any discussion at all? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that is passed. Thank you. Mr. Vanderhoff, proposed award for servicing capacity study.
No, I think it's, I've got the Woolwich Memorial Plant replacement is the next one.
Oh, did I miss one? Oh, I think I have the typo. I'll let you introduce your report then.
That's all right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Shantz. Again, through you to council. This is an exciting one for the department tonight to be bringing this forward. So this is the Woolwich Memorial Center refrigeration plant and natatorium dehumidifier replacement. As council is aware, the department has experienced a number of difficulties with mechanical equipment at the WMC since 2016, specifically the refrigeration plant and more recently the pool dehumidifier. Staff previously applied for federal and provincial funding through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, the ICIP program, and were successful in receiving approximately $1.5 million to carry out the project. The township was originally required to bridge the difference with a contribution of just over $500,000. Since the application was submitted in 2019, delays in carrying out the project have occurred due to the pandemic, both provincial and federal elections, and then most recently a scope amendment. So with the agreement now in place, staff are recommending to award the project to Simcoe at a total cost of $2.2 million after the HST rebate, and for council to provide 2023 budget approval in the amount of $300,000 to fund the budget deficit. So staff are recommending that it's just over 300,000, just over 300,000, that the deficit be offset through 2023 pre-budget approval utilizing infrastructure reserve and property building reserve funds. The budget deficit is a result of increases in the pricing since 2019 when we originally obtained quotes from Simcoe, competitive quotes from Simcoe, and also the scope amendment to include the pool dehumidifier. Simcoe is a trusted and long-standing township contractor who has performed maintenance at the WMC and St. Jacobs on all our mechanical equipment since 2013. The proposed plant has been installed in 44 arena facilities in Ontario alone, and the project would be scheduled for completion during summer of 2023 with no service disruptions. We're certain in the competitiveness of the bid that we've received from Simcoe based on projects that were recently completed at Double Pads in London as well as Guelph. And with that, happy to take any questions the council may have.
Thank you. Council, questions? Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Shantz, through you. There was something that had come before us a while ago. Was it the ability to replace part of the plant as opposed to just repairing it over and over again? Can you refresh my memory? It's not that great. I seem to recall something that had to do with the WMC that came to us a while ago. And I wondered if it was connected to this, and this is just the project, or if I'm completely misremembering. Sorry to put you on the spot.
No worries. Through you, Chair Shantz, to Councillor McMillan. We've had 2 reports recently before Council over the last year, probably with regards to this project. The one being to have the mayor and clerk sign the transfer payment agreement. And the second one was for a scope amendment. We originally had a geothermal component along with the refrigeration plant, and we replaced the geothermal component for the pool dehumidifier. We did that because we installed the CHP at the WMC, which kind of took place of the geothermal component.
Okay.
Maybe that may be it, maybe not. There's been a number of reports before Council, I think, over the last over the last 4 years with regards to the plant. So we've had some difficulties.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments for Mr. Vanderhoff? Do I have somebody who move the report? Councillor McMillan, second. Mayor Shantz. Any further discussion? None. All those in favor? And that is carried. And Mr. Vanderhoff, before you go, we're into other business, and so I'm going to keep you here for a second. I chatted over email with you today. We talked about the Maryhill Fire Hall being worked on in August. So maybe if you could just bring us up to date, the public up to date on that, what's going on there. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So staff, RCS staff and our consultant were provided the building and site plans approximately a week ago. We have reviewed those and we'll be returning them to Dom Construction tomorrow. They will be implementing those changes that we've suggested, hopefully. Hopefully that process doesn't take long, and then they will be submitting those drawings to both building and planning for approvals. Depending on how long that process takes, they are, as soon as they receive approval, they are hoping to get shovels in the ground and start with demolition of the existing fire hall, either at the end of August or worst case scenario, early September.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for this evening. Any other reports from council? Not seeing any. Outstanding activity list. Do we have anybody that wants to address any of that? Give you a moment to have a look at those if you want. And I'm not seeing a bunch of hands, although there are only 6 tonight. Notice of motion, we have none. And I guess adjournment is in place. Councillor Martin, is that your hand up? Yes. And Councillor McMillan, thank you. All those in favor? And that is passed. Don't go away because we have a special council meeting or a special meeting right now. I'll turn it over to Mayor Shantz.
Thank you, Councillor Shantz. So this is a special council meeting basically to ratify what we just did in committee. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, I would look for a motion that the summary of recommendations from the committee of the whole meeting dated August 8, 2022 be approved as presented. And those are the 10 items that we just went through in our committee. I have a mover. Oh, Councillor Smith.
Just for council's benefit and anyone watching, those recommendations are as presented with the change to the agricultural enforcement status and direction. That'll be different from what's on your agenda as you passed a different motion tonight.
Thank you for that clarification. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor McMillan, seconded by Councillor Shantz. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And then a motion that the bylaws in the following bylaw in the hands of the clerk be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed, and that it be numbered as bylaw number 44-2022, and that it be signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with a corporate seal. And that is a bylaw confirming all actions and proceedings of tonight's council. Moved by Councillor Shantz, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That is carried. And now we can have an adjournment again, a motion to adjourn to meet in regular session on Monday, August 22nd, 2022. Moved by Councillor McMillan, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That is carried, and just don't quite go away yet. In closing, Council would like to thank all who participated or tuned into the meeting tonight. Council, please stay connected on Zoom until the live stream has stopped. And I will say good night to everyone.